Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.
Good evening and welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and excited to be hanging out with you once again on Tuesday evening. Always appreciate everybody tuning in and looking forward to having a great show tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about, one of the most important aspects of running a successful business. At the end of the day, your most important job as a business owner is sales and marketing. So we're going to talk about how to more effectively sell and market. So I'm really excited about our guest this evening. Guest this evening is Doug C. Brown, and we're going to talk about doubling your close rate, which doubles your revenue, but it multiplies your profit. So that's really what scaling is all about. So, economies of scale growing such that your revenues are growing faster than your expenses are. So really looking forward to digging into that and just really learn about how to be more profitable. So tonight I've got Doug on, and let me bring him on. Hey, Doug, how you doing this evening?
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for having me on here tonight. Very grateful.
Okay, welcome. It's good to hang out with you. And definitely look forward to chopping it up a little bit about, about the sales and marketing side of business. Excellent. So before we get started, we know each other some, but the audience doesn't know you at all. So if you could take a few minutes, just talk a little bit about your journey, give them a little background and insight into, where you came from and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And we're both in the same hair club. We can say that, right? So, I started working at the age of 3. I worked for my dad's business at the age of 3, and my dad owned an electric machinery, industrial equipment company where we repaired industrial machinery. And I swept floors for for 25 cents a week. And, at 3 years old, that was pretty cool money, getting the money back then. And, I always worked for my dad until I was about 18, but I had side businesses. I was always taking and figuring out how do I create a little business on the side through life. And, I went into the military from there. And even in the military, I had, side businesses. They were always like, high 5-figure, 6-figure, multi-6-figure businesses. And, since then, I've grown and done this. I think this is my 37th venture that I'm embarking upon right now. And, I've done them solo, I've done them with partnerships, and I've grown, I've succeeded, I've failed, miserably crashed and burned, and been part of companies going public. So I've kind of have a whole rounded capacity, and I've helped companies from the Fortune companies that we all know, like Procter & Gamble, CBS Television, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Intuit, to literally tens of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses I've had the privilege of teaching in some capacity.
Excellent. So what are you doing now?
So I still consult. I still consult and coach with CEOs, sales strategies, helping companies, grow their revenue, grow their profits predictably. And then I have a SaaS. I built this personalized, meaningful follow-up system. And the reason I did that, Andrew, was I literally went on vacation and lost a $125,000 sale. Because I was lacking follow-up at that time in my life. And I was like, oh, never again, right? So I wanted to buy something, but there wasn't anything out there that would do what I wanted it to. So we built it. So we have that, and we offer that to select people. It's not like a widely commercial thing at this moment. And we just, in partnership with some really heavy hitters, we decided to do an insurance brokerage, an insurance agency. And so we're kicking that off now in the next literally 6 weeks.
Okay. So yeah, 37 ventures. That's incredible number, especially since you're only 30 years old. That's like,
yeah, it's when I was 30 years old, people thought I was kind of crazy because I was involved in multiple businesses, as some entrepreneurs will do. But yeah, that was only like a year or two ago. So that was that was now 33 years ago. I can't believe it goes by so fast.
Okay. Excellent. So, so definitely we're going to talk a little bit about sort of, how you've been able to really achieve success in business. Of course, like you mentioned, you achieve some to achieve success, you got to achieve some failure also.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're still here and with greater success than the failures. So that's key. So before we get started, I'm just going to take a minute. We do our programming through the Small Business Pro University. So I have a short video just so people can know what the Small Business Pro University is. And then we'll come back with Doug Brown talking small business about doubling your close rate, your revenue, and multiplying your profit at the same time. We'll be back in a sec. Many small businesses experience low or no revenue growth, and the owners are not making enough money. I founded Small Business Pro University to help you break that cycle by empowering you with greater knowledge and enhanced skills to lead your organization more effectively. Over the past 15 years, I have collaborated with organizations like the Small Business Development Center, Rising Tide Capital, Empower the Village, NJMEP, Rutgers University, and SCORE to work one-on-one with over 1,000 business owners and teach tens of thousands of people about business. My experience includes serving as a naval officer, managing businesses, graduating from MIT, earning an MBA from NYU, and achieving the CFA designation, which has prepared me to accomplish my mission of helping 1,000,008 business owners to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth by 2028. My vision is to create the ultimate business ecosystem for entrepreneurs. Small Business Pro University empowers entrepreneurs like you to run their businesses more professionally and create sustainable enterprises. We employ my proven proprietary Masterpreneur Playbook framework to guide your journey along the Masterpreneur path and facilitate your Masterpreneur evolution to work on your business and scale faster and easier. Small Business Pro University provides access to valuable resources, partnerships, and relationships that will help you to sell more, maximize profit, and finance growth. Our Masterpreneur initiatives include the Small Business Pro Network, 100+ expert-led multimedia courses, intensive training workshops, Spanish language training, Leadership Live at 8:05 live stream and podcast, in-person Power Breakfast events, and advisory coaching, consulting, and training services. All right, welcome back. I'm here with Doug C. Brown, talking small business. Hey, Doug, getting started, one thing that I found, and most people tend to not think, is that sales should be maybe even more quantitative than qualitative. Is
Yes.
that something that you find? And
Yes.
what does it take? What does it take to sell successfully?
Well, that's a big question, but I'll break it down into maybe some bite-sized pieces so people can actually maybe take some actionable steps out of that process, right? So if we're an entrepreneur, let's say we're a solo entrepreneur, we have a small team, and what we really want to do is we want to sell more, then it really comes down to this simple formula. Cash flow. So cash flow is the result of lead flow and the result of workflow. So lead flow plus workflow equals cash flow. And so if we want to sell more, then we got to focus on lead flow and workflow. Workflow being those things that we need to do to convert those leads. So really when it comes down to it, it's like, how do we get qualified opportunities and how do we have more conversations? That in itself equals sales. So the more we do this and the more systematic we make this and the more numeric we make this, the more predictable it becomes. So if we measure mathematical ratios, for example, like if we start and we say, how many outbound reaches do we get a day? Like we're going out, because remember, lead flow is the first component of that. So how many outbound, are we doing? What's our connection rate on that? What's our response rate? What's our positive response rate? What's our appointment setting ratios? So if we look at those metrics alone, and then we start thinking, okay, so, what do we got to do once we get an appointment? We've got to set an agenda, have a conversation, et cetera, et cetera. What if we measured those ratios? Or we just measured from appointment setting ratios to how many times we're presenting, let's say. So how many appointments kept? How many appointments presented? How many appointments presented resulted in a close? How many follow-up closes are we having? What is the increased transactional value process? Do we upsell, cross-sell doing that? Do we extend our relationship to new clients through one way or another, maybe referrals? Do we get them to have buying frequency in the process? Do we set them up to buy from us again? When we measure those ratios, it makes it very, very, very predictable. And we can dial those ratios in. But the basic formula is that it is lead flow plus workflow equals cash flow. And then we set up the numbers. How much cash do you want? How much do you want to grow by? And then we've got to hold accountability to the activity. Because, without that accountability in that process, it's easy to start checking, Facebook or LinkedIn or, get distracted by X, Y, or Z. But if we looked at it from a numeric standpoint, hey, I'm going to do 5 presentations a day, no matter what. My day doesn't end until I do 5 presentations. And if you think about that and you work 6 days a week, that's 30 presentations in a week. If you had a 30% close rate or a 1/3 close rate, you got to close 10 new clients at whatever it is. Let's say it's $10,000, 10 new clients, $10,000, run the numbers, So you're doing $100,000 in sales a week at that point. Well, if we did that for 50 weeks, we got a $5 million company. Now, if we're $1 million company and we want to grow to a $5 million company and those ratios hold, we just hold to those ratios every single day. And magically, the numbers really start to come together. So yeah, it's definitely a measurement process. And as it's all said, the math doesn't lie.
So, one of the things when you're starting to try and do that is you don't really know what your close rate is.
Right.
So I guess when you're starting the process, what are some of the key things to keep in mind?
Well, are we starting new? We really don't know how to do anything. Is that
Yeah,
that's the question?
let's assume that,
Okay.
because
Yeah. So first thing out of the gate, when you begin this process, it will be clunky, right? And prepare, because you may not do really well in the beginning. It may seem like, man, I'm trying to, you know, certain people would say, you will SUCK at this, right? That's what they say. And I don't like to say that, because I don't think anybody is, we're all learning at different levels.
right.
So, but you will not be likely as proficient at this in the beginning of doing this. So the key is we've got to set up those metrics and stick to those metrics no matter what. And we're measuring all of these, ratios. If we just measure some basic ratios, how many times we have asked somebody to set up an appointment, how many times that person said yes, or the people, I should say, said yes. And we just measure that and we say, okay, out of 5 times we had one person. Well, we can say, well, that's a 20%, appointment setting ratio. No. You got to get more numbers. So let's look at 100 times. And out of that 100 times, let's say that it is a 20% ratio. Well, then you can pretty much rely on your current skill set and your current ability to get 1 in 5 to talk to you. Now, let's say that your 1 in 5 is a close rate. So that means we're going to talk to 1 in 5 that are going to, show up and get us an appointment. And then if we do 5 of those conversations, we'll get 1 sale. So you can start running your numbers. But then as your skill starts going up, because you start learning things in these conversations, you start learning things in these approaches. I always laugh. It's like the first time I ever asked a young lady out, I was like, stumbling all over the place, right? I was scared, really. I'm a real young guy, and I didn't want to be rejected. And quite frankly, she didn't say yes. So, but it didn't stop me, right? So that's the thing. You've got to learn. And then, so how do you learn? You learn through your university, for example, Andrew. There's like amazing stuff there. I was checking it out. You learn through people like myself who have been there, done that. I mean, I don't know how many no's I've had in my life, but I can tell you it's certainly more than 100,000 what I've done. Right. And the fortunate part is I've had the privilege of working with very successful people, like side by side. I was with Tony Robbins as a president of sales and training, or, Chet Holmes, Russ Whitney, who built, a $1 billion company, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he owned most of that, all of these things. And I've watched them make mistakes through the process. So I want people to understand that no matter what level you're at, there's always another level to climb. And I've watched sales pros blow the sale out where, I actually went back and closed it, in that case. So, and I've done the same thing where they've come and helped me. So what I want people to please understand is you got to start somewhere and get enough numbers so that you get some data. And don't worry about what the data tells you at the beginning. If you're only closing at 5%, well, that's a story that we can work off of. But if you don't know what you're closing at and you're thinking, man, I should be closing at 75%, your brain is going to start to go, this isn't for me. And it's not the case. And then we can look at the industry and say, who is closing at 75%? Right. And maybe there are a few people that are closing at 75%. Well, what are they doing? Now you might find, and I found this, Andrew, in my journeys, sometimes high close rates means not enough leads going through there. I have people, it's like when people say, I have an email list of 40,000 people. The first thing I ask them is, what's the percentage of people that open your email? And they'll go, but I got 40,000 people, right? So, and it's like, so when I hear extremely high close rates, my brain goes, do we have enough lead flow coming in? And so here's a lesson for everybody. The master prospector will always outsell the master closer. Always. I've been doing this now for, man, I'm getting old. I've been doing this now for 60 years.
Well,
right? Since the age 3. And I can tell you concretely that the master closer, the master prospector will always outsell the master closer. Now, if you're a master prospector plus a master closer, you will outsell anyone. Right? So those are 2 great skills to have. And the more you up your skill level on that, and the only way to do this is to study, apply, win, lose, sometimes not understand, ask other people to help you out, and get that outside feedback and the accountability of the process. And the funny part is, Andrew, it doesn't take very long. I mean, we're talking like 3 to 12 months where people can literally be like superstars at this process.
Okay. So every company is different, and the sales process and sales success rate and approach to sales tends to be different. So when you're coming to an environment, how do you gauge how you should approach the sales process, and what key key things that you should incorporate into what you're doing?
Well, there are a lot of people who have different methodologies, right? So the methodology is, look, oh, I studied, say, Sandler sales technique, or I studied, you name the methodologies. There's a lot of methodologies, but the bottom line is that sales is communication, usually between 2 or more people. Now, sometimes it's amongst ourselves too. We've got to sell ourselves on an idea, but it's communication amongst people to do one of 3 things. 1, solve a problem. 2, get a goal. Or 3, capitalize on an opportunity that just came up. Now, our job in the role of selling is to discover what that is for that other person, and for us to be the facilitator to be able to arrive at that, them to arrive at that conclusion that what we do for them solves that problem, gets that goal, gains that opportunity. And so a lot of methodologies that are out there, they have certain techniques and they have their place. But the bottom line is, when you know the basics about, what do they want? Why do they want it? When do they want it by? Is this a commitment that they want to get it, or is it just a nice idea, right? Is it, do they have the authority to do it? Do they have, are they going to do it in a timeline that makes sense for you and for them? There's all these, do they have the budget, if you will, or the ability to buy? Will they buy? And if you just write down these lines, right, and you just follow that, what basically I'm giving you now, and you might add a couple more in, like, I really like to know this. Do they have any competitors in the process? Are there any, boundaries that we can't overcome or can't get, resolved, right? Are there things that are just impedances that are never going to let this thing, go to be able to do that? I mean, if you get the, the basics, like, is there an influencer in the process, right? There are other people who help make the decision. And you just write down these things and you have a conversation on and around these things to help them solve the problem, gain the opportunity, gain the goal. That's selling. It's really not any more involved in the conversational process than that. Now, obviously, we got to be talking to the right person, the person who actually is the apex decision maker, that person who can make the decision and reign supreme over that. But that goes back to figuring out who the ideal right fit buyer is. And once we understand that, we know what to say to those people. And then we could just have that conversation. It leads. So whatever methodology you want to use, that's fine. But what I'd be careful about methodologies in that regard are like trying to apply them so tightly that you miss out on the human to human communication, because we are not selling to titles. We are selling to people, and people have wants, needs, desires, fears, right? We need to know what those things are, and we need to be able to talk to people about those. It's just helping someone cross a bridge from fear to buying confidence. And you move them from fear first to neutral, and then from neutral to buying confidence. And the more that buying confidence is up, the less the fear is there, the more they will be tending to want to buy from you. It's that simple.
Okay. So So really, um, it's important to prepare before you sell.
Oh yeah.
From what I'm hearing, you need to gather information um, outside of your interactions as well as during your interactions.
Yes. Yeah.
What?
I liken it to dating.
Okay.
You better know some things about the person you're going to go out on a date. Like especially if, let's just say you're a gentleman, you ask a lady out and you know nothing about her when you show up. Good luck to an awkward conversation potential, right? So, but let's say because and today there is almost no excuse not to know something about someone. They have social media profiles, they have family profiles, there's all kinds of things. There are tools you can buy for, if you're doing business to business, and you can find out a lot of things about people. So those are discussion points. And you can even look, some people like, you, Andrew, or myself, we put content out there. You're going to learn a lot from that content. You can watch these things. So when we are now going to be engaging in the conversation, we should look at it as this is actually a privilege for us to be able to get with somebody, to be able to help solve a problem, help, resolve a goal, or, get the opportunity they're looking for. And so why wouldn't we look ahead of time to understand, just like we would on a date? Don't we want to impress that date? If you know that date loves, and don't necessarily do this with a business to business customer, but let's say they like orchids, that's like on the back here. My wife loves orchids. That's why those are there. Right. So but if you showed up on a date with an orchid and your date loved orchids, you already got you're up the ladder on the building of rapport, of trust, respect, and and trust will sell more than anything on the planet. You can have all the slick closing lines and techniques and everything, but man, I come in with 100% trust. You're not getting the sale. I will, if I'm reasonably prepared on that process. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're a CFA, you walk in and you don't know anything about the client. That's going to be a somewhat of an awkward conversation. So we all need to understand who we're talking with, because remember, we're talking with people, folks, and people have fears and desires and wants and needs. And they all are looking for a business return on investment and a personal return on investment through your interaction with them.
Okay. So now some people look at selling as telling people what you have.
Yeah.
And I tend to think of it as offering solutions to people's needs, wants, and desires.
Yeah.
Is there a place for both of those, or what is the key? You talked about knowing about people.
Yeah. So I believe there's a place for both of those, right?
Okay.
Because if we can resolve their X, right? X, Y, Z, they're looking for that. And we have something that will resolve that X, Y, Z. I feel that we have a moral obligation to actually tell them about it, because it absolutely astounds me sometimes when I monitor sales teams and the buyer's going, well, I'd like to have this, 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 and that. And the salesperson is like not validating they do that. And so I'm like, my goodness, why wouldn't you say, wow, you're looking for, I don't know, stamped concrete, for those who don't know, it's decorative concrete. We do that. Let me, well, then the buyer might go, well, tell me how that works. No, I'm not doing right. It's like, you don't know, you don't want to do that. You got to tell them, just like you were on a date and the other person says, well, geez, you were a naval officer, Andrew, right? That must have been, had some great times, maybe some challenging times, tell me a little more about that. You're not going to go, no, right? You're going to probably talk to them about when you were naval. I mean, you and I were both in the military. We could bond on that point, right? I was almost a nukey, as a naval nukey, right?
Yeah.
So, and folks, those of you who don't know, that's a nuclear subduty type thing. But, we could bond on those points. We could have conversations. So yes, absolutely. Now, the big mistake people make is they don't let the other person talk and they don't listen, and they're missing out on big cues that are coming through. And so we don't want to be talking all the time like I'm doing right now. You asked me the question. We don't want to be talking all the time like this. What we want to do is we want to be asking questions, and then we can elicit the responses, and then we can fill in what we do with that and position that as the perceived value they're looking for, not ours, what they're looking for. That's the key. Okay. And, as long as we can do that, conversation will usually go great.
Okay, excellent. So now we've got a question here from the audience. Is there a difference between product and service-based businesses and how you approach it?
Well, service-based, you're selling something intangible. So when you're selling something intangible, they can't really wrap their hand around it, right? Or their arms around it. Like I have a coffee cup here, right? That I'm drinking tea. And, if you're a service-based business, most of the time you've got to be able to describe that coffee cup and the taste of that tea and how great it is through your service. So there is a difference in the output of the process of the actual deliverable, but the buying decision is still the same. The buyer is always looking and thinking, I want this. I want to be confident in what I'm buying is making the right decision. And I want to make absolutely sure that it's the right decision for me or in any person that they're representing. So the buyer is always going to be weighing buying confidence, fear. So if we think about this as, I got my hands up right now, one side's buying confidence, we want that high. And we want fear not to be high, because if fear is high, they're not buying. If buying confidence and fear equal, they're confused. They're not buying. So we want to get the buying confidence high, not just a little high, really high. So when we're having that conversation, whether we're having a physical product or something like that, or whether we're dealing with a service such as coaching, consulting, attorney services, anything that's just not something they can put their hands on and be tactile with that. We must be able to convey the value perception of that in the intangible world. And you do that through questioning. And you do that through asking the tough questions. Now, you do that same thing with the product thing, but it's really more difficult to be able to demo a intangible. So we've got to be able to ask more questions to get them to start to imagine in their mind what owning that service that you're providing is actually going to do for them in their perceived value. The higher that perceived value, the higher the price can go. And this is where you can literally make higher profits, because of the higher perceived value. We all will pay more for a higher perceived value. And if no one or anyone doesn't believe that comment, think about first class tickets. Why do people buy first class tickets, to take a 2-hour plane flight when they're paying 3 times more for the same flight? All right. So, you're paying $200, they're paying $600 or $800 for that same flight. And what do they get? A meal? Is that meal worth $600? No, but the perceived value of that service of first class gives them a business return on investment. Maybe they feel, hey, you know what? I'll have focus time to be able to work on this, and I'll be able to get a higher return on my value by being focused in that process. And therefore I'll make more money. I won't be distracted. But the personal return on investment might also be a feeling of, hey, look, I can sit in first class while other people can't. when you're selling a product or service, you want to go to both sides of those, the business return on investment, the personal return on investment. Those can be tangible or intangibles. And how do you figure that out? You start asking questions and listen. When people give you responses, you'll hear that process. When you hear that process, ask another question, start to dig into that process to find out how valuable it is to them. But whether it's a product or service, they're human beings. And at the end of the day, we still make the buying decision the same way. Is this going to be high on the buying confidence and low on the fear, or the opposite way? That's it.
Okay. So definitely, being a service business provider as well, I can appreciate that it takes a little bit, tends to take a little bit more interaction
Sure.
for people to realize it. And, that's why content is good.
Yes.
So cool. So now you have a question about your follow-up system.
I saw that one. Is it Evangelos? Did I get the name right?
Yeah, I think so. Can you talk a little bit about it? Since we have
I'd be happy to. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So it's called Vibitno, Vibitno. So you can check it out at Vibitno, Vibitno.com, and learn more about it. But I'll be happy to explain to you. The reason that came about, quite frankly, was I lost a sale while I was on vacation. It was a $125,000 sale. And I was like, man, that was good money. It cost me a lot to go on a vacation. And I was only in Florida. So, but Vibitno came about because I brought a bunch of high performing sales professionals together. And I said, tell me your biggest challenge on and around follow-up. And they were like, I need to make it personalized. I need to make it meaningful. I need to make it, automated. And so we started putting together all of this on the back of a napkin, literally at a Panera Bread. And so then we were like, all right, how do we do this? And how do we make this happen if we forget? Because we're humans and, sometimes we forget things. And so what we did is we designed a system around that, around the user behavior. And so it will do things like, it'll take persona fields. So Evangelos, as we're learning more about, like, you've got a really cool name to me, right? So I'd look that up and I'd figure out what it meant. And so as I pull these persona fields in, it'll actually track the persona fields, the attributes of the individual that we're going to be communicating with, and it will take those attributes and wind them into the follow-up. So if you literally, I don't know anything about you yet, but I could figure it out. Let's say you had 3 children, 2 were, twin girls, and an older son, and your son loved to play, American soccer, right? And I could put these fields in, and your daughters were in, say, like my daughters were in ballet, for example. They loved it. So, the piece would come out and say, hi, Evangelos, how's your son? First name. How's he doing with, the soccer tournament? How are your 2 daughters? I'm making this up, Anita and Maria. Are they still in ballet doing that type? Now it would start to pull these things automatically. And as it learns more about you and the situation, it will start to get smarter and smarter and smarter. We do use AI in the system on top of this, but we set the whole framework up before AI was even, thought of. So it will also do things like track, like the metrics we were talking about. How many outbounds are you doing? How many this, how many that? And we put a CRM on this because we have found that some users want to use the full system, and some users are like, hey, I want to use it with, Salesforce.com, or I want to use it with whatever program they're using. So it'll track all your interactions, track all your sales, track your metrics. And the whole core, though, is based on building relationships, because it's easy to get a 5 to 15% bump in your sales revenue just by following up. And that's why, half the people don't. Like when people go to networking events, for example, I've measured this now. 13% of people ever get back to one another. That means 87% of the people, if we met 100 people, 87 relationships just attrit and die over time. That's why I built the system, so I could keep in touch with people for in perpetuity, get to know them more. And, we do release it to select people at this point.
Excellent. So yeah, actually I had someone when I was in business school. He said, you're always going to be successful because you follow up.
Yeah.
Because, business school was almost like 2 years of searching for a job.
Well, that's a wonderful way, Andrew, of saying that, right? Because you're going through business school, and what's the outcome of business school? You want a job. You have your MBA. So when most people are getting out, I mean, let's face it, MBAs are not inexpensive to go for most people, or
Right.
they're not cheap. Let's put it that way, financially. And so you want the jobs. But what if you were following up for 2 years, and you had a system for doing that, and now you have, let's say a 57 really good companies looking at you, and you had a 2-year relationship. My goodness, if you don't get a job out of that, hello. And so, yeah, that's a perfect example of that. But what ends up happening is, we don't do that because we have no system around it. And so, a friend of mine once said to me, the greatest distance you'll ever experience is the distance between what you should do and what you are actually doing. And so when I thought about that, I was like, okay, if I close the gap on what people are actually supposed to do, and they want to, but they're not. And then, man, how the years fly by. I mean, 45th anniversary of my high school reunion just happened last week. And I'm like, what? Man, I'm getting older, right? How did that happen? But time just flies by, and there's like 111 people on a Facebook group, but they don't even reach out to each other on a regular basis, right? So, what if we had a system that could do that for us in a way that made sense to people, and they didn't feel like they were just being auto spammed, right? And so that's what we created. But yeah, a great example of the business school. I didn't think about that as a case study, but thank you for letting me use it.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that, we had a question in there about like how much follow-up is too much. Is
Common
there
question.
a limit? What are your thoughts on that?
As long as it's value laden and reasonable to remember, if it's relevant, personalized, and meaningful to the other person, they're not going to be upset that you are continuously following up with them. Now, if you're spam them, if you're just whacking them 5, 6, 7 times a day, like some of us have had that happen to us on email, for example. And it's like all of a sudden somebody puts you on an email list, and it's like you get 3, 4, 5 things a day, or they're sending you 1 or 2 or 3 things a day. That's annoying, right? That's frustrating after a while. But if you're sending quality content to someone, or you're sending quality information where they are looking forward to receiving it, then, staying in touch on a regular basis is never going to be too much. So, if, for example, let's say you have a relationship with someone and you stay in touch with them once a week, and you're just reaching out with really good quality, something that means something to them on a weekly basis. They're not going to tell you, in most cases, please don't contact me anymore, because they're looking at stuff. And here's the litmus test for you. The litmus test is this: is what you're talking to them about making them raise their eyebrows go up and go, wow, I'd like to know more about that? Or are they saying, so what? Because if it's always, so what, or the majority of the time, then the relationship's not going to, be high, right? But I'll give you an example. Like, I'll reach out now to some of my friends once every, say, month or every other month. And I'll just reach out to my friends and say, hey, and literally I was thinking about them. Hey, I was thinking about you and I was wondering how you're doing. How's things in your neck of the woods in, Lunenburg, Massachusetts, for example. It's personalized because I'm mentioning where they live. It's relevant because they know I care about them. And it's meaningful because they know I care about them. And what do we all like to talk about? Ourselves, usually, right? So just a simple message like that, if you stay in touch, without being annoying or without not giving great value exchange, right? If you give great value exchange and you're not just like constantly in their face and space, you can follow up for in perpetuity. I followed up with clients. I have a company called NASCAR that's in my client portfolio. I followed up with them every single month for 2 years. Now I can say NASCAR was my client. So, I have friends and business relationships where I followed up with them for over a decade before we did business. It's not too much. That's what people think. It's too much. It's always too much if it's not personalized, meaningful, and relevant to them. But if it is, it's usually never a problem.
Okay. Definitely makes sense. So now, you've been in business, you've been comfortable selling. A lot of people, even more now, are sort of coming into entrepreneurship out of
Yes.
being an employee.
Yes.
And what are some of the things or the challenges you find they have in being able to sell effectively? Because I think that you come at everything from a different perspective, and it took me a little while to adjust as well. But what how do you help people do that?
Well, I think the first thing, Andrew, is you got to know the business you're in. And so I always ask this question to people, especially when I'm like, if I'm doing a speech or, I'm teaching a class. One of the questions I will ask first is, what business are you in? And people always say, well, I'm in the manufacturing business. I'm in the clothing business. I'm a coach. I'm a consultant. They'll always say that. And then I'll ask them this question: what business are you really in? And they all think. And I'd say, if you don't have a client, you don't have a customer, what business are you in? And they inevitably will say, we're not in business because we can't sustain that, because money in minus money out equals something. And if money just keeps going out without money coming in, it's not a fun day in business. So the answer to that question is, you're in your business deliverable, but you're really in the business of client acquisition. And that's what you want to be masterful at. You want to be masterful at, how do you get a lead? How do you close the lead? Because your deliverable is usually going to be okay anyways. Right? So I would ask everybody to focus on that when they're coming in as an entrepreneur, to understand the rules of business. Money in, money out equals either profit, break even, or loss. And we always want it to be profit. And so the way we have to look at that, is we've got to bring the money in. And the only way bringing the money in is we've got to master client acquisition. That's usually the big mistake that people make. The second big mistake that people make is they make the assumption that because they have a product or service, that person is the right fit for that product or service. And they don't understand who their ideal right fit buyer is. That ideal right fit buyer is that person who wants your product and service on a regular, easy buying process. And so you figure that out ahead of time. So, if I was in, for example, I was starting a newspaper. Well, who are going to be my best readers? Who are going to want to buy the most newspapers? Who are going to want to, be happy at reading a physical newspaper, right? I'd figure that out. Now, today, not a lot of newspapers go out. I'm bringing that up because when I was a young guy, I mean, that was how you get that. Everybody had a newspaper, right? So the whole buying market was pretty much anybody with a household, right? At that point. But now it's changed. So we'd have to find who the ideal right fit buyer is for a particular newspaper. And those are the people we want to market and sell to. And we want to understand what they want. And that's how we craft our language. So understanding the ideal right fit buyer, and then messaging that's important, value laden to them on what they want based on what they're trying to get as a goal. Hey, I want to read the newspaper every single day, and I'd like it to be on my doorstep in the morning. An opportunity. I'm looking for a job in the placement ads, or I'm looking for whatever's in the newspaper. Or they have a problem. Hey, I'm looking for a newspaper that's, has a lot of content that talks about problems that I'm used to. Now, I know I'm going wide here, but when you're looking at your particular industry, if you're a coach, for example, what do you coach specifically on, and who's the ideal right fit buyer for that? If you're in manufacturing, you're going to want to figure that out, because if you don't, it gets really expensive to keep trying things and have them not work, which is part of the process. But you want to minimize that money going out so that the money coming in is a profit for you.
Okay, so one thing you hit upon is it's important to understand that sales and marketing is your job if you have a business, and a lot of people don't look at it that way.
No, the first 0 to a million, 90+% of your life should be focused on just client acquisition. And the big mistake that people make, Andrew, is they're trying to make their logo perfect. They're trying to create their perfect website. They're trying to, is my business card actually going to be the right business card, right? Should it be backsided too, or should it be, they go through all of this stuff. And they create stationery, and they create this, and they create that. And guess what? A month goes by and no sales, right? And so in the meantime, money out, right? And so what we should be focused on, look, here's the thing. True story. I joined a company as the 100th employee. We eventually sold that company. I didn't sell it. They sold it. I got some stock shares, $2 billion. I was the 100th employee. We had no marketing department. Our marketing collateral was recycled newspapers that were photocopied 6 times. You could barely read them. So I want to, go to the insane, right? I mean, most people today be like, that's nuts. You can't do that, right? You can. You just got to get out there and talk to more people. So what if we said, hey, listen, I'm gonna contact X amount of people a day. I don't know, pick a number, power number, 100. I'm gonna contact 100 people a day, which would be tough for most people. But let's say 20. We're gonna contact 20 today with one method, and 20 again today. So 40 people. Anybody can contact 40 people a day. 2 different methods. I don't know, maybe one's cold calling. I don't mind cold calling, but some people do. Maybe it's a LinkedIn connection, whatever it is. You're going to reach out 40 times a day. And then tomorrow, actually today, you're going to follow up with 20 more people, right? So if you just did 20, there's 40, and you followed up with 20, and you did that every single day for a month straight, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen.
Okay.
You will not be able to do 20, 20, 20. You can't, because the relationship is going to spill over into these next relationships. And by the time you get to a month, you're probably going to be able to do 20, 40, 20 outbounds, 40 follow-ups. And if you keep doing this ratio, I call it XXY. If you just do this ratio over and over, within 3 months, you're going to be down to 575. And the old adage that the fortune is in the follow-up, this may sound, self-promoting, but the reality is this works, is that you're building so many relationships as a master prospector that you're following up with these relationships and they want to talk with you. And so therefore you are going to have far more qualified people because you're building relationships and you will close more.
Okay.
So you can send Andrew the check for that advice because that will get you. but in all seriousness, you should be focused on nothing until you hit $1 million, but driving new business, because around that play, and Andrew, you're a numbers guy, around that play, you have expendable cash to be able to start filling in systems and processes and other people to bring into the fold. And you'll do that before you hit $1 million, but the reality is you have the cash to be able to do that, to gain the leverage in the business so you can scale from $1 million to 5, or from 5 to 20, right? That's the key. But you don't forget selling through this whole you never stop. Never stop. When we were doing $1 billion a year in that company I was telling people about, we were still actively every day, every division, every department, every salesperson was selling. Customer service, it was a big sales organization for us. So we just, all that changes is the systems and processes a bit and the numbers. Instead of spending, $200 on something, when you get to be $1 billion company, you're spending 20 million on it, right? Because it's at more scale. That's it. There's no real difference.
Okay. All right. No, this has been great. The hard part is an hour goes really fast. So we're bumping up on the hour, but definitely shared some valuable stuff. But what I like to do before we close out is if you could share 3 key takeaways, because it's good to sort of boil some of the key points down. Many times people can't remember more than 3 things anyway. And, that's, bite size enough so that they can start working on it tomorrow. So I'll give you a minute to sort of think about kind of what 3 key things you want to cover. And then I'm just going to share a little bit about what we're doing in terms of financial management for entrepreneurs and business owners, because that's an area where there's a lot of challenges. So we'll play a quick video. We'll be back with Doug, and we'll be talking small business. Thanks. Every great business owner needs an expert financial management team. As your business grows, you're going to need more comprehensive financial expertise to help you with these activities. Financing growth, managing cash flow, maximizing profitability, strategic planning and budgeting, accurate, timely information for decision-making, determining the appropriate staffing and inventory levels, and preparation for and analysis of potential opportunities. At this stage, you may not have the budget to hire multiple financial professionals from different firms. However, we can provide an outsourced team with over 100 years of experience in CFO, controller, accounting, tax, and bookkeeping to provide the expertise you need when needed. We will help you with your financial needs from A to Z. Whether you need bookkeeping, we will organize and enter your financial information. Accounting, we will provide accurate, timely financial reporting with analysis of key information and trends. Taxes, we will help you with tax preparation, reporting, and submission. Or CFO services, business strategy, financial projections, KPIs, or financing. We've got you covered from A to Z. Use the link below to schedule a complimentary discovery session. You have nothing to lose. Use the link below to explore how we can help. All right, back here with Doug C. Brown, talking small business. Our topic tonight is doubling your close rate, doubles your revenue, but multiplies your profitability. So, Doug, what are the 3 key things that you want people to take away from our conversation this evening?
Well, that video I just watched, Andrew, I wish they'd take notice of what was happening in that video. all the way from the two to three calls of action that went in there. It was masterful. I wrote it down. I was like, wow, what a great idea. And every business has to have something like you're proposing in order to take off the ability to focus on selling. So, the three takeaways that I would say, that I was writing down is, number one, know what business you are in. You are in the client acquisition business. No matter what level you're at, you're still always going to be in the client acquisition business. And if you focus on client acquisition and you become masterful at that, point, you'll never, ever, ever, not have money coming in. And the fun part is you get better at your skills over and over. So you're much better at displacing or preempting or beating out your competitors when you grow your skill sets on and around that. Number two, super important, know who your ideal client right fit buyer is. If you don't, you're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money trying to figure it out the hard way. The more you can dial that in, the better you are. And if you have clients today, you can actually pick out the ones who are actually spending the most, bought the easiest, and who you like to work with, and then start interviewing them, figure out why they bought from you, and you can start duplicating that process. If you don't have a clientele today, you can do this even using AI, ChatGPT, or whatever favorite language model you like to use. You could just start prompting questions in a little self. We teach that type of process as well. Or I'm sure that Andrew can help you out on that as well. And number three is sell, 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 sell. And I'll keep saying it. Especially if you're starting out, make sure you get 90% of your efforts into selling to get to your first $1 million. When you get to your first $1 million, don't back off that ratio much. Maybe you drop it down to 80-20, but you continue to focus on sales and selling. That means getting leads, closing leads. Lead flow plus workflow equals cash flow. And you want to follow that methodology till at least you get to $5 million. And then from there, it may be another adjustment, adding, different divisions, processes, and things like that. But that'll get you from point A to B to C.
All right. Okay. Definitely great. Understanding your most important job and is sales and marketing. But not only that, since it's so important, you should be good at it. I always ask people, how would you rate your selling skills on 1 to 10? And most people say 5. And then I'm like, well, what should you be doing? And it's learn how to sell better. But, sometimes you have to connect the dots for them. But critical, understanding that you're there for client acquisition, doing the research. You can't know your ideal client without doing some research and planning and preparation. And a lot of people skip that part to their own detriment. And
if I could add a fourth, Andrew, it's constantly be challenging your own mindset to grow.
Okay.
Because what ends up happening in entrepreneurship is there are a lot of bumps in the road. Sometimes the potholes, are pretty deep. Sometimes you're going to hit that pothole and your tire is going to come off your vehicle if they're that deep. I've had it happen to me,
Yeah.
Not once, but a lot. But here's the thing. A mentor of mine once said this to me, and I know it to be true today. When he said it to me, it made sense. He said to me, son, here's all you can do in business. You know where you want to go, where you truthfully want to go. You figure that out. Then you point your nose in that direction and you keep taking one step a day toward that direction. And I promise you a couple of things. One, it's going to take you longer than you figured to get there. Longer to get there. Number two, it's going to cost you 2 to 3 times more than you figured to get there.
Yep.
And 3, occasionally you will be surprised that you will get there faster than you even thought you would. And I was like, but he said, what you got to keep doing is keep walking and not keep looking left and right and start taking this direction and that direction. If you truly know you want that endpoint. And that has served me so well, Andrew, because, I'm a shiny object guy too, right? Like most entrepreneurs. And I've had to learn how to, condition myself to not, like squirrel, just go down that path, right? So, and when you get to hang around with a lot of people who are very, very successful, you see different things. That's conditioning your mind too. So it doesn't have to be like you got to study personal development every single day of your life. Get around people who you kind of feel like, wow, should I be here in this room with these people? And you will learn so much because, they've made mistakes. I've had 37 companies. Well, this is my 37th one. We've made probably more mistakes than successes in some cases. And the reality is it's worked out okay. Right. And Mark Cuban once said, Shark Tank, Mark Cuban, he said, you only have to get it right once and you get set up for life.
There you go. Definitely, no, this has been great. Doug, I appreciate you taking your time and sharing your knowledge and expertise. Definitely appreciate everybody tuning in, and we had some good comments and questions throughout the show.
Yeah, I thought they were great questions.
Yeah. Anything you want to share before we close out?
Yeah, I do, because sometimes people think that, I came from this background, or I don't have this, or I don't have a college degree, or I don't have whatever, right? And here's the thing I can tell you. Your desire, determination, and grit will outperform anything beyond any type of degree you can earn. I have 3 college degrees. I don't use most of them, right? Right. I have one in biology. I have one in nuclear medicine. I have one in music, right? In business, but what education in general do is it expands your horizon. When you have determination and the grit to see it through, knowing where you want to go, and you will keep upping your game, that's the biggest key. That's 60% of your success, in my opinion, anyways. And Lord knows I had to learn that. My mother used to look under sofa cushions when I was a little boy to get a quarter or a nickel or a dime in order to figure out, are we going to eat tonight? Like that type of thing. So, and I'm not any smarter. Like, I wouldn't rate myself as a 10 out of 10 on selling. I'd say I'm an 8. But you don't need to be a 10 out of 10,
Right.
I mean, I've sold $1 billion worth of stuff. Like, you don't need to be a 10 out of 10. And that's what I want people to understand is be careful of who you listen to. Listen to guys like Andrew. He's practical. He got it down. Like, I love what you're doing, Andrew. So thank you. I think it's a great service to humanity, never mind just to the entrepreneurial community, because you change lives. You help people navigate the waters that would knock them down, so their families are better taken care of and all kinds of good stuff. So thank you. And thank you for having me here. I'm very grateful.
Okay. No, thanks for joining us. Definitely heard from Doug. His website's in the chat. Also his LinkedIn. He's a pretty friendly guy, so feel free to reach out to him. And thanks again. If you can hang on a minute, I'm just going to close things out, and we'll go from there. All right. So everybody, once again, appreciate you hanging out with us once again for Leadership Live. Thanks for your comments and questions, and really excited about some of the shows coming up. We're actually booked out until October. So we've got a whole lot of great people on the schedule. So definitely check out our YouTube channel. Subscribe if you haven't, and you can actually get information about all our upcoming shows as well. So hopefully we'll see you soon, and look forward to catching you next week. So thanks again. And at the end of the day, the more that you know, the faster and more successfully your business is going to grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.